Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. Here with me today is Bob Reno. Bob is our chair of the board of directors as well. So welcome, Bob. And it's kind of important now to kind of take a step back. As you know, a couple months ago, closing in on just over a month ago with respect to the big, the announcements on the budget changes and how we had a town hall on that. And then just yesterday, knowing that the budget for the province was going to be announced, wanted to kind of talk to you about both and kind of say, okay, where do we go from here and what do we need to do as a team moving forward? So before and after our announcement in January, as you've probably read or heard, there were significant announcements across the province with respect to various changes that other hospitals had to make. Hamilton, Toronto, some hospitals in Toronto, Quinte, North Bay, London, significant changes across the province. And it just emphasizes that we're not alone. And part of the budget that was announced yesterday identifies that there is some help coming, not a lot of help, but it's help. It's better than nothing. So if you take a step back, our province just announced yesterday that their operating deficit for this year, which ends on March 31st, is going to be about $5.7 billion. And that their goal is to balance their operating deficit in 17-18. So that means that expenses will equal revenues for them and they won't be adding to the debt. And right now, the debt hovers around $300 billion for the province of Ontario. So all those deficits accumulate and come into debt, turn into debt. You have to remember that the province's annual operating budget is about $120 billion. Okay, so they have $300 billion of debt and their annual operating budget is $120 billion. And it's been stated that every year the province spends approximately $11 billion just to finance that debt. So once you have healthcare, education as the two primary expense programs for the province, the third one is financing the debt. So that's a pretty big number when you think about it. And when you think about it, it's about 10% of the annual operating budget, the $120 billion. I think it's $11.8 billion they use to finance the debt. That's about 10% of the operating budget goes just towards the financing of that debt. So when you clearly have an operating deficit moves into debt, you have no choice but to balance the operating budget to stop adding to that debt. So if you put this into perspective, one of the facts that kind of shocks a lot of people is we hear about the state of California lots of times with respect to their budget issues. If you talk to anyone in the United States or listen to any of the media, they talk about how the state of California is struggling with respect to its operating deficits and its debt. But if you compare the state of California to Ontario per person or per capita, the California debt is $3,844 per person. Ontario's, is $20,166 per person. So just to put it in perspective. So, since healthcare makes up approximately 42% of our $120 billion operating budget annually, it's going to be tough to balance that budget, the Ontario budget of $5.7 billion, without, number one, you got to increase revenues, or number two, decrease expenses, or number three, a combination of the two. So yesterday in the budget, you heard that the government looked at some things on how to increase revenues. So one of the ways, even though they don't directly say it, is through this concept called cap and trade. And that deals with the carbon emissions. And in order to offset or, quote, penalize companies that are emitting a lot of carbon into the atmosphere, which is not good for our health and sustained health for our country or the world, is you create kind of a penalty, a tax. So they're going to add 5 cents onto every liter of gas that you put in your car. So you'll be seeing that shortly. And they're going to be adding, I think it was $5 to the to your gas, your natural gas bills. They're going to be adding that as well, a certain amount. I don't know if it's 5 or not, but they're going to be adding a certain amount to your union gas bills. So kind of the good thing about that is, as we all know, if they made that announcement 2 years ago when gas was $1.40 a liter, we'd all be gasping right now. But you drive by and it's 76, 77 cents a liter, and it's like, okay, so it'll be 82, 84. We can live with that. Well, we all know when it goes back to $1.40, we'll all be going 5%. Is 5 cents on every liter is hurting us now. But so as a result, that's going to bring in some revenue for the government. Now, also, some of the good news that was announced yesterday was, and it's pretty decent news. My quote in the paper was, "It's better than a kick in the pants." We got 1% increase in base funding for hospitals, so that's good. Now, our base funding is about 30% of our operating budget. Talked about that in January. So it's really 1% on the 30%. So it's like, it's not a full 1%. But for us, as Windsor Regional Hospital, it works out to about $1.4 million if we're interpreting it correctly, which is good. Again, that's better than zero. It's $1.4 million starting April 1st we have that we didn't have prior to April 1st. Now, one of the issues is, and just if you look year over year with respect to our electrical costs, and it's not as if we're, see, there's the electrical costs. Someone doesn't like me. Oh, that's the PAL. Sorry, I'll let you guys go to respond to a PAL. So if you look at the electrical costs year over year for our hospital, for both campuses in total.
OLED lobby front doors.
Oh,
Attention staff, code blue, OLED lobby front doors. Attention staff, code blue, OLED lobby front door.
If someone's got to go, you can go.
Hello?
Yeah. Okay. So the $500,000, we're paying $500,000 more this year in electrical costs than last year.
Alarm, first floor, OLED lobby front doors. Attention staff, personal alarm, first floor.
Someone's, the
OLED
code
lobby.
is using that too.
Staff, personal alarm, first floor, OLED lobby.
So the $500,000 is for both campuses, and we're not doing any more surgeries or any more procedures at either campus's operating rooms than what we were doing before, but we're spending $500,000 more in electrical costs. So that'll help offset that clearly. Now, also what we're hearing is that for that HBAM, that hospital-based allocation model portion, there's going to be, they're talking about two things, is they're going to look at doing what they call a reset, whatever that is. So hopefully that's good. And when we talked about it last time, we talked about there's a certain amount of funding and there's a pie for the whole province, and they're dividing that pie up. What they're talking about is to increase the pie by 1% as well. So again, that helps, is that at least there's an extra 1% added to that pie, that pie's not fixed like it's been for the last handful of years. It's at least going to expand, and therefore those hospitals that are growing in the sense of population in the region will at least have access to that 1%. So that'll alleviate some of the pressure, hopefully, off of us. So that those two items add up to about 70% of our funding. So if you look at 2%, 70% of that is what we could be entitled to up to that amount. Of that 2%. So that's not bad. Definitely it's better than zero. So as you know, when you bring this all down to a local level, as I stated, the funding that's been announced will help because we've been pretty much frozen, if not reductions, over the last 5 years. So that's going to help a bit moving forward, definitely for this upcoming year. So that was definitely pleasant news. And clearly, we still had no choice but to address our own issues, operating issues. And I can tell you the dialogue with the ministry is ongoing with respect to our operating issues and trying to work with them on moving forward. Now, when I became CEO in 2008, I recall we had a run of 10 out of 12 years prior to that. We had a run of operating deficits. and then we had a run of 6 balanced or surplus budgets. So the point is, we can do this. We can fix this moving forward. And again, one of the things that hit us hard last year in 2015 are 2 things that happened is we didn't hear about our funding for the 14-15 year until basically March of 2015. So we were kind of hit with, okay, here's your funding in March for the year that ends last March. And you're going to look at about $10 million less than what you got. And then in August, so just a few months later, then we found out for our funding for this fiscal year, and we're told, guess what? You get another hit. So those 2 things happen really fast on us. And hopefully we're hearing that the funding for this upcoming year, 16-17, should be announced in the next few months, next couple of months, so hopefully before August, that we don't have to wait. But it's hard to operate any type of entity when you don't hear about your funding clearly in the last month of the operating year. That's not good at all. But even halfway through, it's not the greatest. You know, it'd be great if we hear about it now. Entering April would be fantastic. So we're hoping that maybe now with the early budget and with the announcements that they can make the funding announcements early, so we have a very good idea entering this fiscal year starting April where we stand. Now, clearly, we're working with the impacted unions and staffs on the changes that were announced. And again, our goal is to try to, anyone who wants to continue to work here, is to try to find them a spot as best as we can. We're working through that. We're committed to make that happen. We're doing our best, trying to accommodate everybody. But one thing we got to focus on, and it's a lot of, I knew back when we made this announcement in January, I knew we'd be back here today. We just needed things to kind of settle a bit, and sure enough, what happened or what's been happening has been happening. And that's really the purpose of today, is kind of update where we are provincially, but to talk about this issue. The last thing we need to do when we're going through all of this, because been through it before, is to turn on each other. If you want to blame somebody, blame me. Please don't blame each other. Please don't turn this into, it's this classification's fault or this classification's fault, or I can't work with this certain classification because I'm in this particular classification. We can't do that. We can't do that to move forward. The way we're going to move forward with respect to these issues is to work together as a team. And one of the issues is that I hear about is clearly, you know, we'll get some provincial folks coming in here making some comments. So there's been a lot of provincial people with all sorts of opinions about how these changes are going to happen. Well, you know what's going to happen? Those provincial people will disappear, and we won't hear from them. They'll move off to their next project, their next issue, but we'll be left with having to work with each other and work with our community. So we got to say, you know what? You don't live in this community. You don't work with us. Nice to know you, nice your opinion, but we got work to do. We got to move forward as a team and make this happen. So one of the big issues clearly is the, everything okay? Good. Okay. Is the nursing model, you know, change. And the issue, you know, comments came up about, you know, patients are going to be harmed or patients are going to die as a result. Well, folks, and this is for us, I mean, back in 2008, Windsor Regional Met Campus had the highest hospital standardized mortality ratio in all of the world. So, you know what, we can't forget that. And we had problems, major problems with HAIs. And I can go on and on with respect to all the issues we had. And that had nothing to do with the model of care. The way we fixed all those issues and the way we got better is work together as a team and rallied around each other. Had nothing to do with the model of care. So that's what we have to do moving forward. So again, the last thing we need is people who are on the outside are going to tell us how we should act with each other and work with each other. It's internally we have to do this, and we have to work together. And I've always said to people, The last thing you want, hey, if you're interested in someone else's job or you want someone else's job, go get whatever education's necessary. We'll support that. Our foundation supports that. And apply. And go apply for the job. But please don't criticize each other. And if you hear people criticizing each other, you shouldn't tolerate that. I don't tolerate that. Feel free to say to that person, hey, you know what? We don't need that. Come on, let's move on. And if they don't, you can come and see me. You can talk to me. We'll fix it. Because we got to move on together. We can't have this. It'll rip you apart. You won't be happy. And the last thing we want is someone who wants to actually move things forward, not to be happy. And if it's that bad for you, always say to people who say to me, oh, I can't work in this place. Well, you know what? I'll be the first person. I'll help you get a job somewhere else. Just don't bring everybody down around you, or don't let people around you bring other people down. And have the confidence to say to people and the courage to say to people, hey, stop. Come on, move on. Another thing and again, I'm talking about, this is clearly the minority of people, but it gets to everybody, right? Some of the times I can almost draft this out is when these changes happen, I'll get phone calls from families who are complaining about their care, and then they'll raise, well, the reason the care is not good is because you've made staffing changes. And then I have to say, well, the changes haven't actually taken place yet. Well, we heard they're taking place. I said, yeah, in like 4 months. But let's fix your underlying problem. So we work on that. And then, so you know, the way the conversation pivots is then they start criticizing the staff who talk to them about the staffing cuts. And I have to defend that, the staff. And I want to defend the staff. But just for those individuals that think, oh, let's stir the pot with the community, at the end of the day, it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help us, doesn't help our patients clearly, and just spends a lot of time and a lot of energy, wasted energy, on everybody, and especially our patients and our families. And it doesn't make any of us look good when we move forward. Okay? So again, we got to move forward as a team. Work with each other. Don't, these classification issues and all that type of stuff. The way we're going to solve our problems, the way we're going to fix things is rally around each other. And I know we can, and I know we will. And like I said, I know that now's the time to move forward is as a group to make things happen and move forward. A lot of positive things going to be happening. What you're going to hear is things in the next week or so. There's going to be some announcements with respect to certain advancements of certain programs here at the hospital. And the reason things are happening like that is people are seeing from the outside, are seeing our future. And they see our future looks bright at Windsor Regional Hospital, and they want to be part of it. So, again, we're going to rally around each other and get through this. It's going to be tough, no doubt. These are a lot of our friends. This is the worst thing. We didn't want to make these changes, but again, we're going to move through them and move through them together and make things a lot better for our patients and for our families. So again, just keep working. You're doing a great job. You're working really hard. I know it's tough. Anyone who thinks healthcare is easy is dreaming. It's a tough profession, but it's also a very positive profession when you can see the results that you accomplish, all of you, from the patients and the families we serve and the benefits we have with respect to those individuals in our community. So again, that's why I just wanted to update you kind of where we're at from an operational point of view, from a budget point of view, the recent announcement, and then let's all just kind of think about hopefully what I said with respect to working together, and with those colleagues that maybe don't have a great attitude, let's work on trying to help them with that attitude, because again, coming to work when you're not happy is not fun. Not fun at all. No one deserves to have to do that. Okay? So thanks, everybody. Thanks.